So my name is Lenka Kleger. I work in Tereza Educational Center. I'm from Prague, Czech Republic, and I'm the coordinator of a Phenology campaign. And I would like to introduce also my colleague Bára Semeráková, who is a Globe trainer. Hello, Bára. And she's a coordinator of Globe Europe Coordination Office. And also our honored guest, Lenka Hajková. Hello, Lenka. Lenka is a scientist from Czech Hydrometeorological Institute, and she's a phenologist, so she's the one that can give you all the details about today's topic. So the lesson will have three parts. First, I will talk about the phenology, the introduction to phenology, its past and its present, its important and the use of phenological results. Then I will give word to Lenka Hajková, who will introduce her research, the results from Czech Hydrometeorological Institute and the way how they use it. And in the third part, Bára Semeráková will talk about the role of trees in the carbon cycle and introduce you the carbon cycle activities that we prepared for you in the Phenology campaign. Albert Einstein said that if you look deep into the nature, or you should look deep into the nature, and then you will understand everything better. And for me, this is something that exactly says what phenology does. The word phenology comes actually from combination of Greek words phino, which means to show or appear, and logos, which means to study. And this is what phenology is about. Phenology is a study of living organisms and their response to changes of external conditions, to the changes of seasons and climate in their environment. So phenology focuses on the relationships, not on the organisms or on the conditions, but on the relationship of these two. It is actually something that I think we all know and we all do, even without knowing the word phenology. It's like, I think all of us have noticed the change of color of leaves. Most of us do it in the Phenology campaign, so of course we did. But anyway, maybe we watch the birds migrate, and all this is actually phenology. Even the kids in the kindergarten, then when they start learning about nature, they often focus on the changing of seasons in the nature, and they paint pictures of trees in different times of a year. So yeah, this is also the very basics of phenology. Phenology focuses on both animals and plants. So it's zoophenology is the name for the science about animals, and phytophenology is for the plants part. And in the Globe program, we focus mainly on phytophenology, and within the Phenology campaign, our focus are trees. So we know what is it, phenology, but how actually the nature knows that there is time for some change. This is my question to you, and I would like to ask you to if you feel like, please write your ideas to the chat window. How does a bear knows when to start hibernating, or how does a plant knows when to start blooming, or a tree when to get rid of a leaf? First idea is increase of temperature. So yes, exactly. I will go to the lack of food. Yes. Some more ideas. First, I want to tell you what is it phenophases. It's or what we actually observe in phenology. There are some the changes that animals and plants like manifest during the year are usually well visible, and these stages that we can call this is actually called phenophases. These phases are like they are repeating annually. But they are not exactly the same. They don't come exactly at the same time, but this is something that appears year by year. So the bear hibernates each year, or the trees start blooming each year. The main factors for this or the very crucial factor is the length of the day and the length of the sunshine. It's changing periodically during the year based on the Earth's rotation around its axis and around the sun. And for example, for the trees, the amount of sunshine is the main factor that starts bud burst or a leaf change. One of the comments here was the temperature. Temperature is also is very important, and for the bear it would be the main reason to start hibernating. It's one of the climatic factors which play an important role in phenology. So it's temperature, precipitation, and wind, and influences plants as well as animals. So for example, not only bears start hibernating, but also birds lay eggs dependent on the temperature, for example.
Yeah, I like one comment that we have in the chat. We have there changing of the nature around, that this is the factor. So this actually says it in a summary, that it's all when the nature is changing around, be it temperature or food or light, that other people wrote on the chat. It's the factor. Sorry.
Yes. It's true as well. And yes, and then there are more factors like geomorphology or geographic conditions like latitude. We know that, for example, the trees start the bud burst earlier in lower latitudes than in higher latitudes, or when the geomorphology is more complicated, like for example the plant grows in some kind of valley, it's usually colder. It influences the climatic conditions as well. And if it's important for the phenology to observe together the changes of the phenophases of animals or plants together with the climatic factors, so we can study them together and see the correlations of the two and use them for the further research. I would also like to briefly mention the history of phenology, because it's very long and interesting. Phenology is actually one of the oldest areas of environmental science. It was something that's connected to humankind since like a long history, since ever, because people always perceived the changes in weather and their impacts on plants. It was important for agriculture. It was crucial for survival of people to know how to adapt to changes of nature and how to grow their crops or to take care of the animals in correlation with changes of environment. And this knowledge was part of education of the nations and of the wisdom, and it's often shared and expressed in proverbs. So I have here a few for you, like when the fall of the leaves come late, the harsh winter is coming. A cold and a moist April fills the cellar and fattens the cow. And the last one comes from Greece. It is not summer until the crickets sing. So I'm sure that you know many of such proverbs in your languages. And the first written records of phenology comes from China, and they are about 3,000 years old. And another country that has very long history of records of phenology is Japan, where for Japanese culture the cherry blossom or the blossoming of sakuras is very important. So they have records of the time of cherry blooming for 1,200 years. And I want to show you how the records look like. So here you can see on the x-axis, you can see the year. So it starts in the year 800 and finishes in 2016. And on the epsilon axis, you see the date. It's March, April, and May. And so we can see that although the date of cherry blooming oscillated quite sharply over the years, then since the year 1829, the trend is going down. It remains unchanged, and the blooming is earlier and earlier each year. The reason is that temperatures in February, in March are growing, and the higher temperature sends a signal to the cherry tree to start blooming. So the festival of celebration of cherry blooming had to shift over a week earlier, and it's widely seen as a proof or as a evidence of advancing climate change. And there's one interesting fact that this graph finishes in 2016, but actually the last year it was even earlier. The blooming came even earlier. So the sakuras started to bloom already in March, and on top of it, there was one more blooming season in autumn. So the trees got completely confused by high temperatures and other climatic changes in Japan. And tourists coming to Japan for the festival have hard times to plan their visit. Just a few more words about history. I would like to mention two fathers of phenology. One of them is Carl von Linné, who is a well-known Swedish botanist, zoologist, and physician. And he created principles and methodology of phenology. In the middle of 18th century, he started to run network of 18 phenological observation stations and kept the records. So he was really the first one to do such a systematic work. And another name is Robert Marsham. He lived in 18th centuries in the same time like Carl von Linné. And what is interesting that he is actually one of the first citizen scientists of modern times. He was a wealthy landowner who was very interested in nature and in phenology, so he kept records of phenology observation of many different species of plants and insects and animals. And he even published them in a book. And his family kept working in his name and keeping the records until the half of the 20th century. So it's a very, very long record from one family, actually. So today, phenology is an important science. It's source of information for scientists to whom these results provide important data for understanding the annual cycles of plants and animals on the local level, and on the global level also report on climate change. There is a strong international cooperation these days. In Europe, we have, for example, a European Phenological Network that was initiated by Wageningen University, and there are like thousands of stations in European countries that cooperate within this network. We have also European Phenology database that collects results and makes them available for the research. The growing interest is due to the climate change and the connection of phenology and climate observation. So the importance of phenology observation and their use is accelerating. What is important in phenology is voluntary activities, as many observations are actually carried out by voluntary observers. Also on the stations on many of the countries, these observers are guided by employees of meteorological services, but they are voluntary workers, and also school research and citizen science projects are important part of gaining the phenology data. So also our work within the GLOBE program and our pictures that we send to Grow Up are used and are important. On a global level, it's very important and interesting actually to see the shifting of seasons across the continents, to watch the green wave that goes through the continent, or how the birds migrate, for example, between the countries. And I want to share with you the image that you can see on the right side of the slide. This is actually a satellite image from NASA, from Aqua satellite, which was taken last Friday on April 22nd. And it shows springtime in Western Europe. Yeah, there's Czech Republic, for example, visible, and yeah, I'm not sure about, yeah, some of your countries might be visible on it. Yeah, you can see that the land is getting green. And one more interesting fact is that when you look to the sea, this is the North Sea, and you can see some like light blue or greenish parts of it, spots on the sea, and this is growth of phytoplankton. This is how now the water is getting warmer, and the conditions for growth of phytoplankton are getting better. So it grows and blooms, and it can actually be visible even from the orbit. So this is what we can see. We can see from the satellite how the green wave moves and how the nature changes. But the resolution is actually quite big, and it's remote. So it's very important to do also the land observations to verify the results from the satellites, and to see what's really going on like local level, to be able to interpret the data from the satellite. Important outcome of phenology is the calculation of vegetation seasons, of their length, of the time when they start, when they finish. Because like when, for example, when the trees start, the leaves of a tree start growing, and when they start falling off, because this is closely connected to global fixation of carbon, of CO2, to the level of CO2 in the troposphere, and in this way to the global climate change. But Bara will talk closer about this, so you will know more from her. But yes, phenology is important for basically phenology is important for the monitoring of climate change. Now I have one more question for you. So in which field do you think that the phenological data are applied on the local level?
Okay, we have one, agriculture. Then we have so the infrastructure, and health. Infrastructure, that means, for example, the construction, the time of construction, and the health issues, yeah, the health situation. And we have a request from Magdalena, if you can explain this a little bit more.
There's a wide use of the phenological data. It helps us to understand. First, it helps us to understand the adaptation to variation in the land of growing season, and to other impact of climate change. So to know the plants will need to adapt, how we will need to adapt, for example, our agriculture. So when to start with planting, when we will need to harvest, when to apply insect pest control products, like to spray the fields against insects when they actually hatch. So when the dangers of damage of the agricultural crops come. So this is important. Another important thing is our field is forestry, where we can recognize the climatic conditions for the forest areas. We can know which type of forest would be good for the locality. There's an example from Czech Republic, which is really actual. We in Czech Republic we have a lot of spruce forests, which are actually not ideal for our conditions. And right now there are many of the forests, like huge areas of the forests, are being damaged by insects and have to be cut down. So we have to cut down a lot of forest areas and try to plant another tree species. So this is also something that phenology helps us to understand. Importance also used in medicine, where we know the pollen allergies, they are very common, and it's good for those who suffer with them to know when which plant blooms when, and when to be careful about pollen. Yes, there are another applications. I will not talk about it in detail, about observation of land cover, or in tourism. I mentioned the tourism for festival in Japan. So it's good to know when to come to see some interesting things in the nature, for example. Yes. Very briefly about the globe about phenology in the GLOBE program. In GLOBE program, we focus mainly, as I already mentioned, on plants. The main focus is on green up and green down observations, which in the Phenology campaign we focus on trees or in shrubs, but in some countries the focus is on grass, because maybe they don't have that many trees or shrubs. So it's possible to do similar observation with the grass areas. And another focus of GLOBE is lilac phenology. It's also observation of green up and down, but with a bit different stages. With lilacs, we observe first leaves, and when lilacs are fully leaved, when they start blooming, and when they end blooming. So a little bit different phenophases. And yeah, we have a European Phenology Campaign that I think I don't have to introduce to you. And we have a Grow Up tool. And I want to show you how the results from our observations are actually used. So this is a picture from an article that was published that was written by Arnold van Vliet, who is a scientist from Wageningen University. He's also involved in the Phenology campaign. He's one of the Phenology campaign scientists. And he published this article in the Nature Today website. Nature Today is a platform in the Netherlands that brings daily information about nature in not only in Netherlands but also in abroad. And in this article, Arnold used pictures from Grow Up. These are the 4 pictures that you can see in the slide, and together with a record of temperature for last 4 years, 2017, 18, 19, and 20, and he compared the temperatures and the results. So it's visible that in the year 2018, February was very cold, and we can see also from the picture that the tree has no leaves or very small ones. While, for example, this year is warm, so the trees are already quite green. So I wanted to show you this because it's one of the applications of the results that you actually send and share, and it's not the only one, but it was a nice example. Okay, and this is all from me from the introduction, and I want to encourage you to ask questions or write them to chat, and after that Lenka Hajková will continue talking about their results.
Lenka and Bára, thank you for the invitation for this meeting. I am Lenka Hajková from the Czech Hydrometeorology Institute, and I am responsible for the Phenological Network in the Czech Republic. This Phenological Network is a part of the biometeorological application, and it has a long tradition in the Czech countries. I suppose that also in your countries you have a long phenological tradition. And nowadays we have the network with the wild plants. So we observe spruce and larch and other plants. And our volunteer observers use the methodology, and so they know what to do and what to observe. But I can show you the density of the network. So it's the density of the network nowadays. So it's the density is low, so it's very important to have the phenological observation also from other possibilities, such as GLOBE program or other citizen science programs. And maybe you ask what for we can use the phenological observation. Nowadays we use it mainly in the agriculture. We have the agriculture models which are calculating based on the mainly on temperature, which is important for the phenophase onset. For example, we use the phenological phases such as emergency of the sugar beet or winter wheat, and on this model we give the early warning. We have the early warning system for the agriculture, so they know what to do in advance. What can they prepare for in the agriculture planting? Yes. The other important part in agriculture is the agriculture regionalization. You know that the climate is changing, so the regionalization also is changing. So the limits for the plants are another than it was before 30 years ago, so, for example. So we have to calculate it once again based on our phenological records, and put it in some methodology or to some atlas. We also has issued the atlas of the phenological conditions for the 20 years. And now we have 10 years more, so we can calculate it once again, because the change in a plant development is very, very rapid. The other very important part where can we use the phenological observation is the medicine, as Lenka said before. We use it in the pollen allergy information, and I can show you the map from this year about the birch. So just a minute. So we put such kind of maps on our website, or send it to other people who are interested in this topic. Yes, and when I show you the other map, just a minute. Now, can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, this is the map of the deviations from the beginning of flowering in this year of the silver birch, and it's the deviation from the 30 years period. So you can see how it's changing. That's at almost on the majority of the country is earlier about 5 or 10 days. Yes. So this information we put on the Czech Hydrometeorological website. And the other part of information of the phenology we also use in the forestry because we give the warning system for against the pests. We have the big troubles in our country with the bark beetle. So also for this information, we use the phenological records, and it's necessary to change the composition of the forestry in the Czech Republic due to great damages in the forest. Yeah. And we also use the phenological records in the fire risk warning system because it's important the part of the time of the year when it's the unfolding and ending of leaves. Yes. So when it's the leaves unfolding, that you can there is a higher risk, or there is a high fire risk together with also with the meteorological conditions, yeah, with the drought and with the high temperatures and so on. And of course, we use the phenological observation in climate change. In climate change, it's the best record, the phenology, because it's objective, and it's not only the temperature, but the plants have inside itself all factors: temperature and rainfalls and other. And we also use it for the in ecology and in botany, and also for tourism and for the general public. Every week we make biometeorological information, and we put the information from the phenology development for the week, and it's you can find it on Czech Hydrometeorology Institute YouTube and other website informations or possibilities. And we also use it for the publication. We are preparing publication together with also data from GLOBE program that we want to compare the phenological information from our network and from the other citizen science network, such as GLOBE program. I don't know, you can ask me what you want to know more, because I can talk about it hours and hours, and I don't know what are you interesting mostly. But I want to inspire you that the phenology is really important, and it's important to have the longest series and to have no gaps in the time series, because then you can use it for the information. And I show you another map about the cherry tree. In this year, I don't know if you have in your countries that the kiss under the cherry tree on the 1st May is very important. And this is changing, because we have calculated that the beginning of the cherry tree is earlier, 17 days earlier for 30 years. So usually it was at the end of the April or the beginning of May, so it was good for the kiss under the cherry tree. But nowadays the cherry starts to blossom at the beginning of April. We have very mild winter, and it's also the phenology is also important for the fruit trees because it's very dangerous for the frost, yeah, because the plant season starts earlier, and then come the frost. We had very hard frost in our country 2 times in this year. I can also show you on the map, so we can at least give the warning system. Yes, so I show you some map. So this is the blossoming of wild cherry. Yeah, so you can see that it's earlier than 5th of April, and just only in the mountains or in the high altitudes it start blossom later than 26th April. And
there is a question, Lenka.
Yes.
Magdalena is asking, what kind of issues can phenology solve? And what would happen if we didn't care about phenology?
Yes. So, I stop the sharing. What kind of issues? It's very important for the pollen information. Yes, because the patients can use less medicine for in their treatment if they know very early that the pollen is in the air. And the information from the feminine phenology is very important in this issue. Yeah, in agriculture it's also very important. It's important what you can do in advance. You can prepare it for a situation. Yeah, if you don't have the information, you can prepare it for it. Yes. So, and if we don't have the phenology, it would be pity, because I think that it's important to know how its landscapes change. Yes. So in all this topic, we can use the phenology. Is it okay? The answer?
Yeah, yeah, she says yes.
Yes.
This spring and the winter being very dry, because here in Malta it was quite dry, and we are thinking that during summer the trees will be having a hard time, because last year it was very dry as well. So we have 2 years in sequence, 2 dry years. In such a situation, how can phenology help us? We try to plan different trees because the weather is getting very dry.
The phenology can help in the changing of species. Yes, that the development, and also that, for example, with the frost, that if we give in advance the frost warnings information, so the gardeners or fruit producers can prepare for the situation that they, for example, put something under the not under on the tree. So I can call it exactly in English, yes. Or that fires, or that they can try to help the fruits not to blossom frozen. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
It's about I think that it's about the early information, and yes. If we more information, more phenological records we have, then more precise are also the models we use. Yeah, it's
what I am more. Sorry, what I'm also interested is because we live on an island, and I think the weather on an island is quite, you cannot, what on a, there is no they are not very predictable because there are so many conditions which determine the actual climate and then the health of the trees. It's different from your country, which is landlocked sort of. What do you think?
Well, but I think that you also have scientists who are the meteorologists, right, in Malta, or who are
yes, I've got.
So perhaps it has to work in some way, right? So I think these are very nice questions, but I think very difficult questions to give to Lenka, since she's not
okay. Sorry,
right?
okay.
But I think a good question that perhaps you can contact some scientists in your country with, and you can learn more about it, because that's what we encourage always teachers and coordinators to do, to connect to the scientists in their country and to give them different sorts of questions. So it's good that you asked.
Thank you.
And I'm very sorry I didn't
No, thank you for your help.
The question hall, so maybe you can write it on the chat, yes?
Okay.
Maybe I can also add with what Xavier said, that being on an island, yes, it does affect the way trees grow. In fact, we've noticed, we've been participating in the GLOW program and in the Phenology campaign from last year, and we noticed that in Malta, bud bursts are earlier when compared to the rest of Europe. And it determines because we have higher temperatures, and also since we are an island, trees adapt to the conditions of our specific climate. So yes, I do think that we have different characteristics when compared with mainland Europe.
Thank you. Okay, so Bara, can we ask you to talk about the carbon cycle?
Sure. So my part is about phenology and carbon cycle. And first I want to say why it's me talking about the carbon cycle. I work for the regional office of the GLOW program, but before that, I worked with the team of the scientists from the Charles University here in Prague and the University of New Hampshire in the US on the project of carbon cycle learning activities and hands-on experiments with plants. And these activities, they have been developed within GLOW program, and it's more than 10 years ago actually. But since that time, I'm kind of interested in this area of carbon cycle and carbon and plants and the role that they have in the climate of the Earth. And but today I'm not here as a scientist, because I'm not a scientist, but I will be talking to you more from the position of educator. So, but if you have any questions, even related to science, you can for sure raise them. But I am, and I will answer them the best way as I can, or I will just relate you to some other sources. So when I always heard the word cycle in English, I always imagine the bicycle. You know, it's that easy. So just to explain something that very theoretical as the carbon cycle, I always try to imagine that it's the same like cycle, that it moves constantly. The cycle moves, the particles in the cycle, they move, they transfer from one place to another. And they don't carry really people, but they carry carbon. Most of you're familiar with the water cycle, where the agent that the cycle carries is water, is the droplet of water. So in carbon cycle, we can imagine it's the atom of carbon, or it's the molecules of different substances where the carbon is the main composite. So this is the carbon cycle we are going to talk about. And I want to say that this image is just a very simplified version of the carbon cycle. As you can see, it's mostly the CO2 that is displayed on this picture. And obviously, it's not only CO2 which we can find in carbon cycle. We have other gases that include carbon, such as methane and many more. We have all the carbohydrates that we eat, right? These are also part of the carbon cycle. We have the carbon sediments and many more liquids and gases and solid matters that are part of the cycle. And there are two important things that we always need to think about when we talk about carbon cycle. One is a time scale. If we talk about the carbon cycle over the last, let's say, 10 years, or if it's a carbon cycle that shows us how the carbon traveled over the last million of years. So these kind of models of carbon cycle, they can differ according to the time scale they represent. That's the first one. And the second one is the scale in space. If we really talk about global carbon cycle for our planet, or if we talk about a local one. So the example of the local one, you can see on this picture, there is just like one house, one cow, one tree, one dead bird, poor one on the right. And that's it. But you know that that's not the global carbon cycle, right? This is something very local. And there are many other sources and flows of carbon that we don't see on this picture, be it an ocean, or be it a sediment, factories. There are many more that are missing on this picture. So my question to you now is, so why do we talk about carbon cycle in connection to trees? And you can talk, you can just unmute and talk. You don't need to type to the chat window. So anyone, so why do we talk about carbon cycle in connection to trees? Any idea? Okay, nobody. Okay, so at least I don't hear anybody, but at least I hope I made you think a little bit. And so why is that? It's mostly because of this, because of photosynthesis. I'm quite sure you all know about photosynthesis. You know what it stands, what it represents, what it means. We all learn about that. And here I want to say that when I was a student and I learned about photosynthesis at high school and later on, I didn't really consider it as something really, exciting. I was always like, okay, it's quite difficult. It's full of equations. It's full of chemistry. And usually we learn about it that we needed to learn by heart the equations and some calculations and numbers. And it was not that interesting for me. But later on, I realized actually that, okay, there's something in the chat. Okay. Later on, I realized that it's actually magic. It's a wonder of nature. It's one of the, for me, it's one of the biggest inventions that nature has. This process, which allows plants to just transfer the energy of sun into the chemical energy and into the energy of their bodies. It's so wonderful. I cannot do photosynthesis. I don't have the chlorophyll, the pigment in my skin, right? The plants, they can do that. They can just, catch the energy of the sun, and they can they can be alive because of that, and they can grow. I cannot grow just because of the sun energy, right? So it's something wonderful. And I want to just emphasize, if you're a teacher, please, if you teach your students about photosynthesis, don't forget to present it as something, as a small wonder of nature, as something which is amazing. You know, we as human beings, we are trying to develop all kinds of solar panels to do the same practically, to catch the energy from sun and to turn it into electric energy or heat energy. But we are not that much successful. The plants, they are very successful with that. And exactly about that, about what photosynthesis mean, and we have the activity in the European Phenology Campaign. So it's the activity number 1, and it's called Tree Growth Game. So together in this spring in the Phenology Campaign, we have 4 activities that relate to carbon cycle and trees. And this is first of them. This is the easiest one that you can do also with the small kids. It's practically a simulation of this process of photosynthesis, where the kids can play different roles of, you know, bringing the water or the carbon dioxide to the plant, or some can represent the leaf that is growing, someone can be the sun that is shining. So it's like a simulation game. So I will just continue with the next step. So where else can you find carbon? If you look around you now in your room or out of the window, where else we can find the carbon? The answer is that the carbon you can find almost everywhere around you. Scientists say that carbon is actually the basic building block of life. Means that it's included in almost everything that is alive and that we consider alive. And it's everywhere on the earth, in all the spheres, in the atmosphere, in the air, in the ocean, which is the hydrosphere, in the crust, and in the geological sediments. It's everywhere. And what is, when you look at the amount that actually in the biosphere, half of the mass of the biosphere is carbon. So you can see that, you know, water is very important. The water cycle is important for sure. But as you can see, the carbon cycle, it's something which is very essential as well. And as I already mentioned, the carbon cycle is very tightly related to the Earth climate system. You know that the different gases in the atmosphere, they actually help to regulate the climate in our in the Earth, on the Earth. So, and again, the carbon is a big part of that. And another thing is that all the ecosystems, somehow they show us how the carbon cycle goes through them. If you take the food chain, for example, if you remember that bird on that first picture with the cow, if the bird was not dead like this, but if, for example, there was a cat who ate the bird, right? Then the carbon which was in the bird would not decompose to the soil, but it would stay in the cat, at least for some time, before the cat, for example, would breathe it out in the form of CO2, or the cat would build it into the muscles of its body. Or at the end, the cat would just get it out of the body. You know how. So that's really important to see that carbon is everywhere. It flows almost everywhere. And that's why it's important to study it. And as an educator, I always like to use the simulations and the videos. And when we talk about the global cycles, I think it's the only thing actually how to explain it, because the cycles are dynamic. So if you just try to describe it in the text, It's very difficult. And the better thing is to have an image, and the best way is to have a video. So this is one of the simulations or videos or animations that were produced by NASA and that are available freely on the website. All of them that I have in the presentations you can access through the links, and you can work with them during your lesson. Some of them are with commentaries, some are not. So you can do your own commentary. So for example, this one shows the general carbon cycle, and it shows different pools and fluxes. Actually, this one shows only the fluxes, which it means the flows of the carbon, how it moves from one place to the other. And these are represented by arrows. There are two colors of arrows, and you can think yourself what is the difference between these two. So I'm playing it now. I hope it will go. Yeah. So you can already see that some of the carbon is actually released and some is being absorbed. So always when the carbon is released from one place, it's the yellow arrow. And the purple one is that the carbon is absorbed. Now we can see how it works in the water or in the ocean perhaps, or in the lake. And now we are coming to the atmosphere, how atmosphere exchanges carbon with biosphere, for example, now. Yeah, so that was just one example of what you can use when you're teaching about carbon cycle. This is another example, a little bit more complicated. That's a diagram where you have not only the flows as we had, so like these, the red ones. You have also the pools, which are in the blue color. The pool means like a storage of a carbon. It's the place where the carbon stays for a longer time and where it accumulates. You can see the big pool of the deep ocean, a deep ocean storage of carbon. Here on this diagram, you can also see the numbers, which can show you proportionally how big the flows are or the storages are. So if you want to more explore this, please download the activity number 2, which is about carbon sources, fluxes, and pools. And what students can do, they can learn about the global carbon cycle, but they can also do the map of the carbon cycle in their area, the local carbon cycle map. It can look like this. Right? It can look like this. It's important to have the legend there. So one color of arrows that signifies the carbon release, and the other color that signifies the carbon uptake. Obviously, students will not have the numbers there because this is very difficult to do, and that's difficult even for scientists to do, to calculate these numbers, like how much of carbon moves from where to where in time. So that's the activity number 2. It's about the local carbon cycle and about understanding of what are the pools and what are the fluxes, and what are actually the most important pools and fluxes. So if I go back here, you can see that if we just focus on the red ones, which are the fluxes, the biggest flow of carbon on the Earth, as you can see, is this. Is the photosynthesis. So again, you can see that it's very important to learn about this process and about the role of the vegetation, because it's the biggest flow of carbon on the Earth from atmosphere to biosphere. And here the arrow goes actually to the land, right, to this greenery. But in the real photosynthesis is going on also in the oceans. The phytoplankton and other green small plants that live in the ocean, they also do photosynthesis. So it's very important not to focus only on the land, but also on the phytoplankton, and that's what scientists do. But we in the Phenology campaign, since we observe trees, we most focus on this part, which is the on-land vegetation. I'm coming to the topic number 3. And here we are focusing, we are zooming in from the global level, from the forest to the individual tree. And we want to see how the tree changes over its lifetime, from a young seedling to a big tree and to an old tree which is dying or decaying. So here you can see how the carbon storage and the carbon intake actually changes during the life of the tree. First, it's taking in more carbon because it's growing. Even when it's adult, it still consumes so much of carbon. When it's aging, then the balance of the carbon that the tree takes in and releases, it comes to 0, it's balanced. And once it starts decomposing, when it's not alive anymore, the branches are falling off and it's decaying, then the carbon is again released to the soil and to the air. Again, we have a nice visualization of a life of tree. You can watch it later. You have the link here. It's again a short one without a commentary. And if you want to do some activity with your students besides this short movie, you can actually go around your school and you can take photographs of trees in different stage of the life of the tree. And then you can choose some of them and you can actually calculate how much carbon is stored in that tree. We have a calculation in that. It's a kind of Excel sheet. It's slightly more, let's say, advanced, but it's not that difficult. And the only input you need is you need to know the tree species. So what species of the tree you observe. And then the second one is you need to know what is the diameter of the tree. So you can measure the circumference and you can calculate the diameter in the pressed height. The step-by-step guide you will find again in this activity number 3. And the only thing I want to say that the number you will get, like how much carbon is stored in your tree, if it's 20 kilograms or half a ton, it's an estimate. Just be aware of that. It's not the exact number. These calculations, the scientists use it for estimating the carbon storage in trees. And mostly it's used for the whole forest, not for the individual tree. So I think it's good to use it for comparison. For example, to compare that this tree has more carbon than that tree, but be careful about, using it as an exact number. You will see that how it works in that spreadsheet. And this calculation is very much related to allometry, to allometrical equations, which are very widely used also by foresters when they want to assess how much of wood is in their forest, because most of the carbon is stored in the wood. So basically, the wood is the most important when we talk about the volume of carbon in the tree. So we talk about the life of the tree, and now we are zooming in even more from the lifetime, which can take hundreds years or at least 80 years. We go down to one single year. And my question is, what time of the year a tree builds in the biggest amount of carbon into their biomass? And to help you with answering this question, I will show you a video which I will just stop sharing this and I will play from my computer. And okay. Yeah. Now you should be able to see the preview of the video. So before I play it, I will just explain what you can see. So the video will be changing. It's showing the change in time over, I think, 15 years. It starts here in the year 2000. And this scale is showing us how much carbon is actually absorbed from atmosphere, from the air, to vegetation. So how much carbon the vegetation on the planet Earth eats up from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. And more green it gets on the map, it means that the plants are taking more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in that time of the year. So my question was, which time of the year the trees build in or take the most of carbon from atmosphere through their bodies? And my question actually goes to our region, to the European region, to the Northern Hemisphere. So if you are watching this video now, please just focus mainly on this area and try to detect in which month it's the greener. I will play it and then I will try to make the video go a little bit slower because it's quite fast. So please watch it now. You can see the months are changing down. So now we are already in the year 2002. And if you just watch it, you already see that there are some patterns that it's year by year, it looks the same. That in some time, the Northern Hemisphere is more green, and in some time it's the Southern Hemisphere or the tropics that are more green. So as you can see, I think you already had some time to observe that. So now I will show you, I will stop it here. So now we are in the March. And now you see slowly the Europe is getting green. May, June, July, August, and again it goes down. And again green. So you can see that it's the onset of European summer, of the season of summer, that the carbon cycle is very much influenced by plants and especially by the forests not only in Europe and that in Russia, in Siberia, but also in Canada and USA. So these forests are actually eating up so much of carbon from the atmosphere that it can be detected even in places, even in observatories which are far away. For example, the observatory in Hawaii on Mauna Loa, which is measuring the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And even there the scientists actually detected, or they observed, that the yearly circulations of, or not circulation, the fluctuations of the CO2 levels. And why these fluctuations are there? It's because it's because what you could see on this video of the role of the forest in taking up so much of carbon in summers. So I will go back to the presentation. So the answer for this question is definitely from May to, let's say, August of the Northern Hemisphere. If we talk about Southern Hemisphere, it would be the other way around, right? Because now when we have summer, they have winter. So obviously the vegetation behaves in a different way. Okay, now it does not allow me to switch the, yeah. So this is just the legend for that video that I showed you. The video comes from the Terra satellite of NASA. And here you have the explanation what you can see on the video. This I already explained. You have here also what the net primary productivity means and the link to that video. There is also a similar video that you can use. It has just different time scale. Again, link is here. And this is, these graphs are showing what I already said. These are from the Hawaii Observatory at Mauna Loa. And here on the vertical axis, you can see the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere in parts per million. These parts per million, these are this ppm, which we can also hear in the media and the discussion about the climate change, like how many, you know, ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere are safe, and what is the rate that is not safe for our climate system anymore, and if we are behind that or not. I mean, if we are above that already or not, or when we will be above that. So here you can see how, and these are the years. So here you can see that the concentration of CO2 is slightly increasing over years, but we are more interested now in this red curve, which is showing up the yearly oscillations due to the intake of the carbon cycle, of carbon from atmosphere by plants. So you can see first here that always from May to September, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going down, is decreasing, because the plants are activating the photosynthesis and they are eating all the CO2. And then again, from September to May, it goes up. And it repeats like this every year. So this is, for me, this is one of the, you know, most exciting connection that we can see from that video to this graph. And if you want to work with that again with your students, you have the activity 4 for that. You have links to these videos there or to these graphs, and you can give them the same questions that I was giving to you during this presentation. There is also this animation which again shows the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, and it's with the commentary, so you can even watch it later.
I'm a climate scientist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. What you're looking at is a supercomputer model of carbon dioxide levels in the Earth's atmosphere. The visualization compresses 1 year of data into a few minutes. Carbon dioxide is the most important greenhouse gas affected by human activity. About half of the carbon dioxide emitted from fossil fuel combustion remains in the atmosphere, while the other half is absorbed by natural land and ocean reservoirs. In the Northern Hemisphere, we see the highest concentrations are focused around major emission sources over North America, Europe, and Asia.
So again, you can see that here we are in March, and then the concentrations of CO2 are quite high. And now in the next stage, it will change, the colors will change from the red colors to more bluish colors, which means that the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere is decreasing.
Notice how the gas doesn't stay in one place. The dispersion of carbon dioxide is controlled by the large-scale weather patterns within the global circulation. During spring and summer in the Northern Hemisphere, plants absorb a substantial amount of carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, thus removing some of the gas from the atmosphere. We see this change in the model as the red and purple colors start to fade. Meanwhile, In the southern hemisphere, we see the release of another pollutant, carbon monoxide. This is a gas that's both harmful to the environment and to humans. During the summer months, plumes of carbon monoxide stream from fires in Africa, South America, and Australia, contributing to high concentrations in the atmosphere.
Okay, so now you see that we are in August and the colors completely changed. And well, you cannot really see the legend here, but you can have a look on that later, that the colors which are more bluish, they signify the less concentration of carbon dioxide. And that one, which are more into red and purple, they are the high levels. So in August, you can see that the concentration of CO2 actually dropped, not only in the northern hemisphere, but I would say globally. And that was showed on these graphs from Hawaii as well. So that was the last resource, the last activity that I wanted to show. Either you already have these activities because Lenka was sending them out in newsletters, or you can download them from the European Phenology Campaign page, either from the Spring 2020 tab or from Download Materials tab. They are always together with this basic phenology activity. So this year we put it together into one file. So if you download activity 1, you will have both the observation of the tree and the carbon cycle activity there. So if you already downloaded these, please look at them and you can use them in your classroom. Not only now, you can use them any time of the year. It can be used with different age groups. Some of them are for younger kids, some are for older kids. And you can always give us feedback how you liked it. You can send us or share on the discussion forum your outputs, like this, that map of the local carbon cycle that your students draw, or any others, or the amount of carbon that is stored in your tree that you observe. So we are really looking forward to hear from you how you use these activities. And the next, I just want to say that there are many more resources that you can use from GLOBE regarding phenology. They're all on GLOBE website, and here are the links that how you can get there. There is also the interview with Lenka Hajkova, who was with us today, or still is, and where she talks about phenology. It's a very nice interview. And that's the final thank you for you. If you have any questions, you can always contact us in these email addresses. If you need any links and resources that we show today, they are either right on the slides or here on the last one when we have the references. So that's the end of my monologue. I hope that you liked at least this brief introduction of why it's important to talk about carbon cycle when we talk about trees and phenology, and when the seasons are actually important because they are much related to photosynthesis and to the CO2 that is taken up from the air by forests. And yeah, that's all from me. I don't know how many people we still have and if there are some questions, but feel free.
Thank you very much, Bára. We still have 17 people on board, so please give us a questions if you still have time for it. We do. I would like to thank you very much to all of you for coming to this online lesson, and we exceeded the time, so thanks a lot for staying with us longer and listening to all the presentations. And we hope it was interesting for you, that you learned something new that will be useful for your work, for your research, and for your work with schools. And as Bára said, you can tell us about your ideas for the next lesson, or if you have any questions to this presentation and to the topic, you can write to us. You have my email on the Phenology Campaign website, and emails of Bára and Lenka are here in the presentation